Hi everyone, welcome back to the 86 F's to Give podcast. I'm your host Al, and I am so happy that you are here with me today. I'm just gonna hop right into it because I think this one might be a little bit on the longer side because it's something that I'm just very passionate about, and I did research and have a lot of things to say. So as you can tell by the title, this episode is 86 Imposter Syndrome. So we are going to be talking about all things imposter syndrome. I did some research about the different types and the symptoms and kind of what causes it. And then I'm going to talk about my own personal experience with imposter syndrome. And then we'll kind of debunk some of the beliefs that people with imposter syndrome have and kind of reframe our thoughts towards the end. And I also asked people on the podcast Instagram, which is 86 F's to Give. Make sure to follow us. I asked people to share any thoughts or questions or ideas that they have about imposter syndrome. And I'm going to wait until the end because I went through them, and I think some of them I will answer throughout the episode. And then if there's anything that we want to go over or chat about at the end, I will throw that in there after we kind of go through the whole episode and have more context. So let's get started. What is imposter syndrome? So when you look imposter syndrome up, it all kind of boils down to being a psychological condition that is characterized by persistent doubt concerning one's abilities or accomplishments, accompanied by the fear of being exposed as a fraud despite evidence of one's ongoing success. So in my words, I would say that when you feel like you're not good enough or worthy, or that you don't deserve to be in the rooms that you're in, basically, or that the good things happening to you, you don't deserve them. It's really sad because we'll talk about some stats later, but a lot of people experience imposter syndrome in their lives, and that's because of all different types of things. But you know, the main underlying thing there is confidence, right? Like you want to feel confident enough in yourself, and it also kind of relates back to anxiety and social anxiety, and all of this intertwines to make us feel like imposters in different situations. So we're going to kind of talk about all of that today. And I first, when I was doing some research, I stumbled across a really awesome article about imposter syndrome, and it kind of breaks it down into different types. And I thought this was really interesting because I didn't realize that there was different types of imposter syndrome, or that it manifests differently in different people. But when I read these 5 different categories, they all made a lot of sense. And I think I have felt, honestly, each of these at different parts in different situations. And it's not just, oh, I'm this one type of imposter syndrome. It kind of can overlap, and people can experience one type in one situation and a different type in another. So I thought it was a really cool way to kind of describe what you're feeling. And I always like to try to put words to my feelings or what I'm going through, because sometimes it's hard to even vocalize what you're feeling. So breaking it down into these different types made a lot of sense for me. So I'm going to share them with you guys now. But the first one is the perfectionist. So this is obviously somebody who thinks that things need to be perfect, and at any slight error, they think that they're a failure. The superhero is the next one, and this is somebody who thinks success is based on how many roles they play or how many hats they wear, and if they don't play all of these roles perfectly, then they are a failure. The third one is the expert. This is somebody who thinks they need to know everything on a topic that they are good at, or that they're the professional in, and if they, don't know one thing, or somebody asks them a question that they don't have the answer to, they feel like they're a failure. The next one is the natural genius, and this is somebody that expects to meet high standards quickly and effortlessly. This is somebody that, school probably comes really natural to them, or athletics came really natural to them, or music came really natural to them as a kid. And then when they get older and start to realize that not everything's going to come natural to them, they feel like a failure because, for all their life so far, things have just been really easy for them. And then the last one is the soloist. And this is somebody that needs to do things alone and does not want to ask for help, and thinks that needing help is, a sign of weakness, or that they're a failure. And you can kind of see the running theme with all of those is that if you are not, these things, the perfectionist, the superhero, the expert, the genius, the soloist, like if you're not doing good at all of those things, then you're a failure. And this actually leads me into kind of the symptoms or the signs of imposter syndrome, is that one of them is the belief that if you aren't the best at something, then you jump to extreme conclusions and thinking, I'm going to be fired, or I'm a failure, or everyone hates me, or I'm not good at my job, or things like that. So jumping to those extreme conclusions is one of the symptoms or signs that you're experiencing imposter syndrome, is that you're not able to really give yourself grace when you make a mistake. Another symptom is having the belief that other people overestimated or over-inferred your capabilities or your skills. So, maybe when you're getting hired for a new job and you think that you weren't maybe necessarily the most qualified, that, you think that other people think that as well, when in reality they hired you because they think that you're going to do a good job. So having that belief that other people are overestimating you is a sign of experiencing imposter syndrome. Another one is that you think you'll inevitably let everyone down, and that you think people are going to figure out that you're a fraud or that you aren't qualified or that you don't belong. And then the last one is that you feel anxious about success because you think it's all based on luck. So you're like, I don't know when the next time I'm going to be successful is because it's all based on luck, when obviously in reality, success is based on your hard work and your perseverance and your networking and all of that. So those are some symptoms that if you are experiencing any of that, that you might be in an episode of imposter syndrome. And I've definitely felt all of those at different times, and it's hard to, overcome those thoughts. So we're going to talk about reframing all of those in a little bit, but I wanted to chat about some of the causes or things that affect people and cause them to have imposter syndrome or feel like an imposter. And the first one we kind of talked about is, change. So you just got a new job, you just got a new house, you bought a car, or you had your biggest paycheck so far, something like really drastic change in your life, and you just feel like you don't deserve it. And then the other ones that I thought were really interesting is gender norms and racial biases. So of course, gender norms play a big role in this because, sometimes, and these can go both ways. Like, I'm going to be going back in time here, but like, I don't know, this is not the case anymore, but this is the first example coming to mind. But, like men in ballet, they might feel like a imposter because, a lot of the dancers or people in their class are women or girls, and those gender norms kind of affect that. And obviously I do not believe that men cannot dance. Some of the most incredible dancers I've ever seen are men. So that's just, I don't know why that popped into my head. But, and then on the other hand is like women, I'm a woman in sports, and we don't see, now it's grown immensely and women's sports are doing so well for themselves. It's amazing to see, but women were not in sports, and even like in smaller scales, like in colleges or high schools or whatever, like women were not athletic directors or SIDs or things like that. So seeing, wanting to kind of step into that role, it can give somebody imposter syndrome because they haven't seen anybody, represent them in the space that they want to be in. And it goes the same for racial biases. If you don't see, and we'll talk about representation in a minute, but if you don't see a Black woman doing something that you want to do or in a space that you want to be in, and then you as a Black woman get to step into that space, you might feel like an imposter because you're like, well, I'm not really sure if I'm supposed to be here because no one in this room looks like me. And that can really be detrimental to our mental health and our brain and how we think about ourselves. So I think all of that's really interesting. And I think I know I said I was going to wait until the end, but somebody shared that imposter syndrome is kind of created by the patriarchy. And I feel like this kind of all fits into that. Is like, yeah, it's these societal beliefs that, stereotypes or certain beliefs that certain people are not supposed to be in certain rooms. If I don't see somebody that looks like me in a room that I want to be in, I'm not going to think that I'm allowed to be in that room. It's sad, but it's something that I think our generation is working really hard to overcome. And there's definitely been a lot of progress, and even the examples that I came up with aren't super relevant anymore. There's always growth to be done, but it's cool that those examples aren't super relevant anymore because that means growth has been done. I wanted to kind of mention one stat is that studies show that 70% of people have felt imposter syndrome at least once in their life. And that's kind of why we're talking about it today, is because 70% is a lot of people. And if they felt imposter syndrome even once, that's really sad to me. And as somebody that's experienced it many, many times, I feel like I'm in a much better place now with it. But it's like, it's sad that people feel like they're not good enough or worthy enough, or that their skills aren't up to par to be in a room that they want to be in. I'm somebody that grew up with confidence being instilled into me since like the day I popped out of the womb. Like, I define myself as a confident person, and I still feel imposter syndrome at times. So I'm imagining somebody that didn't have parents and family members, telling them how beautiful and strong and smart they are. And, I just can't even imagine how somebody that didn't grow up in that environment would feel. And it's so sad to me that we all, 70% of us all feel this at some point in our lives, because we're here and of course we deserve the things that we want. It's just so crazy to me, the things that our brains come up with, really. I think that's what I'm realizing right here in this moment, is just our brains come up with the most bonkers things. And it's like, where did my noggin even get this? And obviously we know it's from societal expectations and things, but it's just like, come on, brain. Like, you gotta have a little more faith in me. But yeah, this kind of leads me into my personal experience with imposter syndrome. I actually remember the very first time that I can remember, I think, but I'm pretty sure this was the first time that I experienced imposter syndrome or felt like an imposter. I think I was in like 5th or 6th grade, and I was taking ballet at like a ballet school, and they were really strict. They were this couple from Russia, and they were incredible, and a lot of the girls there had been dancing with them since they were like 3, and I kind of came in late as like a 9, 10, 11-year-old. And every year they performed the Nutcracker as like with the students as the cast at the end of the year. And I don't know if one of the girls mentioned something to me or one of the teachers mentioned something to me, or I just made this up in my head, but someday I came over with the fact that like the next year, after my first year, I was going to be the lead girl in the Nutcracker. And I really can't remember if somebody mentioned this to me or if I just felt like this and made this up in my head. But the first year I was there, I was one of the children in like the chorus. I wasn't a lead girl or anything, but then something came over me that I was going to be the lead girl next year. And I literally remember going to my parents and not being able to explain this, but I just told them I wanted to quit. I was like, I do not belong there. I don't want to continue dancing there. And I just did not believe that I was capable of being the lead girl in the Nutcracker. I remember my parents being like, are you sure you want to quit? Like they weren't really fully understanding, and I didn't even have the words to explain it. And now looking back, it was imposter syndrome. Like I genuinely did not feel like I deserved to be in that room with the rest of those ballerinas. It's so sad to look back on because I loved dancing and it was so much fun, and I loved being in the Nutcracker, and it would have been so cool to be the lead girl in the Nutcracker. Are you kidding me? So not that I don't even know if I was going to be. It was just something that popped into my head one day, and I was so scared that they were going to make me the lead and that I wasn't going to be good enough, or I was going to forget the dances or something. I don't know what got into me, but I was so scared. And yeah, I literally quit the entire school. Like I went back to my old dance studio because I was so scared. And yeah, I mean, obviously since then I felt it in job interviews, in throughout my athletic career, throughout my professional career, and just kind of in general in life. When good things happen, I'm like, hold on a second, like I don't deserve that. But then I always have to put myself in check and be like, no, you have worked so hard to be the person that you are, and you deserve it. So yeah, if anybody has similar situations, or if my story about my first time experiencing imposter syndrome reminded you of a story, I would love to hear anything that, like, any situations or stories that you have as kids or even as adults. Like, please comment them. And I kind of want it to be in the sense of that we're all in this together. Like, we've all felt this, we've all gone through this, and that we're all working to overcome it. So if you have any experiences, and kind of, to me, like, saying that story out loud just sounded ridiculous. And I was like, like now as an adult, I'm like, of course, like I would have been fine. Like it's funny to look back on. So I kind of want to take the power back from imposter syndrome and share these stories. And, once you kind of type them or say them out loud, it's like, I was being a little silly, wasn't I? I hope that you guys feel the same when you share your stories. But now I wanted to talk a little bit about how we can deal with imposter syndrome and how we can overcome and reframe our thoughts. So the first one is kind of a tip that I got from this article, but also my mom has shared this with me, and I've heard this in many different situations, is just to question yourself. Like, ask yourself, is this true? Is it true that I don't belong here? Has anybody said to me, you don't belong here? What evidence can I find that supports that I don't belong or that I don't deserve what I have? Often when you ask yourself these questions, you'll realize that no, it's not true, and I actually have zero evidence that I don't belong here, or that the evidence is things I'm making up in my head. Another question you can ask is like, how is this thought helping me? And I love that one because it snaps me out of like a spiral. It's like, I'm not helping myself at all, actually. So let me just stop spiraling, like let me not do this and move on and, reframe my thoughts. And that's kind of the next step into dealing with imposter syndrome is, anything that you say negatively about yourself, you can reframe to be positive. So if you say, I'm going to fail, you can say, instead of that, say, I've worked really hard and I will succeed, and I'm going to do everything in my power to do the best that I can. And that's all I can do, right? You can reframe that, saying you can't. And this is since we were kids, I'm sure parents and coaches and teachers have reframed us to say, I can't yet, right? So if you say like, I can't do something, it's no, I can't do it yet. And I'm going to work really hard until I'm able to. I'm going to practice really hard. And saying something, reframing, I just got lucky. or they just hired me because they had no one else, or whatever it may be. Like, no, I got this opportunity because I deserve it and people believe in me. And even if, like, this goes back to episode 1 of talking about like telling yourself a different story, like even if they did just hire you because you were the only applicant, or like tell yourself that you got this opportunity because you deserve it, and that will bring you peace. Like, you don't have to assume the negative. And that leads me to my next couple ways to kind of overcome imposter syndrome, is to remind yourself of your success and your strengths. Like, tell yourself that you have been successful in the past, and remind yourself of a time where you have felt like this, and you've overcome and or worked through it, or 2, it wasn't even true that you were feeling like that. I just said A and 2. I meant A and B. But you guys know what I mean. Like, remind yourself of success and strength, of your strengths and times that you have overcome feeling like this, and know that you can overcome it again, right? Like, if you've gotten through it once, you can get through it again. And we've probably gotten through harder things in our lives. So referencing those and remembering the tools that you use to get through that, like, use that now. The last one that I want to really hone in on is, and emphasize, is to give yourself grace in unfamiliar situations. You're starting a new job. Yes, you maybe have worked in this field and you know what is going to be asked of you because the job description and they've told you, but you're joining a new company, you're meeting a bunch of new people, you're in a new environment, you have to learn how this company does things. Like, you have to give yourself grace. You're in an unfamiliar and uncomfortable situation. Like, of course, you're not going to be perfect the second you step in there. And to have that expectation of yourself is unrealistic. That word that we struggle with sometimes, but it's unrealistic to think that you're going to be the best the second you walk into a new situation. Now, say you've been there for 10 years, of course you're going to have higher expectations of yourself because you know exactly how this place runs, you know exactly what's asked of you and what you need to do to be successful. So don't put 10-year expectations on day 1. You've been there for literally 1 day or 6 months, or not even a year, or even a year. Like, it's going to take time to learn and grow and be successful. So just give yourself grace. Another tip that I want to share with how I deal with imposter syndrome, or just kind of anxiety in general, or stress about a situation. And this is something that I'm really passionate about, and I've kind of reframed this phrase for myself, is to fake it till I make it. And I don't mean this in a like being a fake person or acting or putting on a front or not being your true self. That's not what I mean at all when I say fake it. I mean fake the like confidence and the, even if your body is like freaking out inside, like holding your body in a way, like your body language and appearing that you are confident is kind of what I mean with the fake it till I make it. Like, look like you know what you're doing, even if inside you have no idea what you're doing. And I say this because if you are able to tap into something deep down in you that allows you to fake whatever confidence, to make it look like you know what you're doing, then you actually have that already inside of you. And that means that you aren't really faking it. Do you know what I mean? You just have to fake it to kind of trick your brain and kind of silence those anxieties and those fears, in order to bring out that confidence. And I love this way of thinking, and it's helped me so many times throughout my life, is like, I'm just going to fake it. I'm just going to act like, literally with like posting and stuff, I'm like, I'm just going to act like I'm an influencer today. And then like, I produce some of my best work, and it's like, yes, girl, go out there and act like you have 1 million followers. Like, why shouldn't I, And then obviously you can do that in more serious situations with like work and stuff. It's like, I just recently worked for a professional lacrosse league this summer, and my first day, they're like asking me all these questions. And I'm just trying to like my best to like get through like day 1. And I have never done what I was doing with them before, but I was eager to learn and just like taking notes and looking at everyone and making sure that I was doing what it was asked of me. And everybody had no idea that I'd never done this before. They're asking me, oh, like, where do you work? And I was like, oh, well, I do this. And they're like, wait, you don't do this? And I was like, no. And it's like, you just have to have that confidence and say yes and say it confidently and know that you are going to be fine. Like, you're going to figure it out. Faking it till you make it is, I feel like it's kind of had like negative connotations in the past. And that's why I said I wanted to, I'm taking back this phrase, and I use it all the time, truly. So that's one of my biggest tips with dealing with imposter syndrome, as well as some of the ones that the article shared. And then finally, I want to touch on the ultimate reframing of imposter syndrome. And I actually got this from the book called I'm Not Yelling by Elizabeth Leiba. I have it with me here today, so if you're on YouTube, you can see the cover. This book it's called I'm Not Yelling, and it's a Black woman's guide to navigating the workplace. And in it, she has a chapter on imposter syndrome. And when I tell you this was my favorite chapter in the book, I was writing in the book, I was taking notes, and it really stood out to me that I knew I wanted to bring this book for reference when I did this episode. But the book in general is, like I said, it's a Black woman's guide to navigating the workplace. So it's all about kind of reframing and channeling your inner confidence and your worth, and knowing that you have to be kind of in a different mindset than everyone else sometimes, because people, like we talked about earlier with racial biases, people are going to look at people differently, and that's really sad, but it's the truth. So she's awesome. This book is incredible. I recommend this for not only Black women, but people that work with Black women, because it shares so many experiences that she went through and that other Black women go through, and she does a really good job of going back and forth between studies and her own personal experiences and her reframing and her thoughts. And it's just a really well done book. I actually read this for work and kind of a book club thing, and it was some of the best parts of my month, because the conversation and just hearing other Black women's experiences was just awesome. So I highly recommend this book. But in the chapter about imposter syndrome, she talks about hearing celebrities like Michelle Obama say that she has imposter syndrome, and how that shocked her, and how people would be shocked when she, the author, would say that she has imposter syndrome, because she was such a successful author. She realized that her and Michelle Obama had similar upbringings and experiences. She read Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, and kind of referenced that book in her book here, talking about how their lives kind of overlapped and they had really similar experiences and upbringings. And she realized that they both were feeling like imposters because they were treated like imposters due to being Black women. So she kind of reframes the entire concept of imposter syndrome to being imposter treatment, and realizing it's not something that I have. I don't have imposter syndrome. I was treated like an imposter. And this actually blew my mind reading it. I love when that happens. I love when you hear a quote or something that just your brain, because it just changes everything. From that day on, I'm I'm not an imposter. Society and other people and anxiety has made me feel like an imposter, and it takes that out of being a part of you. Sometimes we take on mental illnesses and things as a part of our identity, and it's not. I'm not my mental illness. I am a human dealing with, feeling like an imposter, or dealing with anxiety, or dealing with depression. And I think that's just a really, really awesome way to reframe it. And so she also brings up in her book that 70% of people will experience at least one episode of imposter syndrome in their lifetime. But she adds that most of the reports of it are by women and marginalized individuals. So minorities, right? She goes on to say, of course, a group of people who've been stereotyped to be unintelligent or lazy are going to feel like imposters when they're in a room full of people who society perceives as the opposite. Back to talking about gender norms and racial biases and stereotypes. Those play a huge role in imposter syndrome or imposter treatment, because of course, right? Why, like I said earlier, if I have never seen a Black woman be president, why would I think that I could be president? And she also talks about the lack of diversity and representation in the media, and how that is a huge contributor to imposter syndrome or imposter treatment, because like I said earlier, if young people never see people that look like them in the rooms that they want to be in one day, they're are more than likely going to feel like they don't belong once they get there, or even worse, they're going to think that they can't get there at all. They're going to crush their dreams before they even attempt, because they don't see people that look like them in those rooms or in those spaces. And that's the saddest part, honestly, to me, is little Al could have quit ballet altogether, or, I don't know. It's just sad that society has such a huge role in how people feel about themselves. I think that's kind of a theme that will get talked about in a lot of these episodes, because, these things just get put on you as kids and you don't even realize it. And you have to go until you're able to really dissect and realize how life and society and people are affecting you. You just go about thinking those things about yourself, and it's sad, right? And the last thing from this book that I wanted to share is this quote about kind of her mindset and her mindset shift about imposter syndrome being actually imposter treatment. She says, "I started adopting this attitude that if I was in a room, then I belonged there. and I would stay there and be successful for as long as it felt right for me. If I was in a room, then I belonged there. That is what I want people to take away from this. If you are in a space, if you got a job, if you just bought a house and you are standing in that house, you are standing in your office, you are in a room with people you never thought you'd be able to talk to, then you freaking belong to be there. You wouldn't be there if you didn't belong to be there, right? So that is something that I want people to really take away from this. And that was kind of the quote. Like, I underlined it, I starred it, I earmarked the page, because like I was like, wow, like that is really how we should all be thinking. If I'm there, I belong to be there. I know I've said it like 6 times, but really that is what we all need to be thinking, right? She also, after each chapter, has reflection questions and affirmations that reference the topic of the chapter. I think I'm going to post some of these on social media, but I just wanted to share a few of the affirmations that really resonated with me. I do not allow others to define my worthiness when I enter a space. My education, experience, and expertise are not framed by the perception of others, and I bring value to every space I inhabit. Those 3 really stood out to me. There's 10 total, so I'll probably share more online, but I bring value to every space that I inhabit. That is, I want to start using that into my daily affirmations, because it's so true. Like we talked about in last episode, like we are all here to be the best versions of ourselves and go after our goals and network and achieve the things that we want to achieve, whatever that may be. And that means that we belong to be wherever we are and that we bring value to all the spaces that we enter. I love this book so much. I want people to read it. I'll maybe link the Amazon link as well. I think people should read this book because it really was life-changing for me. Yeah, I wanted to really quickly go over some of the questions that people sent in or comments, because I think we actually touched on most of them. But yeah, I talked about the imposter syndrome being created by the patriarchy and how somebody else said how it affects men versus women disproportionately. And we talked about that as well, right? It's 100% affects women and marginalized people, races, much, much worse, right? Just due to those gender and racial biases. And then somebody else said, do I suffer from it because of my own thoughts or because of how I interact with my peers? And this made me so excited because I knew I wanted to talk about this book, and that kind of made me think of the reframing, right? Of how it's not imposter syndrome, it's imposter treatment. And that's exactly what this question is asking. It's no, I'm not suffering from this because of my own thoughts. I'm suffering it because of how people are treating me. So I thought that was a great point. And I was so glad when I saw that question come through. And then somebody else said, I wonder if it ever goes away. Like, do the best people at any job, do they have imposter syndrome too? And we also talked about, Michelle Obama saying she has imposter syndrome, or this author saying she has imposter syndrome. Maybe some people overcome it, but I think some people also do still feel it even at the highest stages. So I thought that was really interesting. And then the last one, somebody asked for exercises to overcome comparison and imposter syndrome. And I hope we kind of touched on some of those. And I want to do a whole episode on comparison as well. So stay tuned for that. I hope you all stuck with me here to the end and enjoyed. If you have any thoughts or comments or questions, please comment in the YouTube comments, the social media accounts, or on Spotify. I think you can comment there as well. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this one and it resonated with people. And if no one's told you, I am proud of you and I love you. And remember to 86 your imposter syndrome, because it's not even a syndrome, it's a treatment, and it's not our fault that we feel this way. So I will talk to you all in the next one. Bye.